Yo guys, what is up? Here we are with another reading video, and today we are on chapter 8 and 9 of The Boys Who Challenged Hitler by Philip Hoos. Welcome to 2020, I just wanted to say that. We also did just pass 200 subscribers. I mean, that is crazy, like how fast we've gone from 100 to 200. I mean, if we keep this up, I'll be at 1,000 2 years, maybe, probably less, so I don't know. So just thank you for subscribing, and remember, if you're already subscribed, you gotta hit that subscribe button, that's for sure. Okay, so without any further ado, chapter 8 of The Boys Who Challenged Hitler. Chapter 8, An Evening Alone. Ned Peterson. One night, after an especially raucous Churchill Club meeting, I sat in my room with the door shut and tried to stop my head from spinning. It was amazing how suddenly the old monastery could go from bedlam to silence when the last member pulled the door shut behind him. I rubbed my hands together to keep warm. There wasn't enough coal in Denmark to heat this place. I looked around my room. My living space was actually more of a studio than a room. Canvases were stacked in corners and sketches were strewn all over the floor. Paintbrushes protruded from cloudy water in jars that occupied nearly every flat space. I painted the way other guys played sports. Landscapes and portraits and abstractions covered my walls, the ceiling, even the window curtains. I had painted half a scene on my desk. Now I realized I had never completed it. My parents saved money to send Jens, the family golden boy, off to college. And who could blame them? Jens was already respected as a Beth Mat student at Cathedral School. My parents did something special for me as well. When we moved to Aalborg, Father opened up an account in my name at the local art store. I could purchase all the brushes and easels and tubes of paint I wanted, and as a result, I could hardly make my way around this little room without putting a shoe through a canvas or knocking over a jar. But tonight I didn't even feel like painting. There was too much to think about. War shadowed everything. I pulled the window curtain back. What were all those cars doing at Badolfi Square? The lines of vehicles kept getting longer and longer. Would they soon be on a transport ship to Norway, and then across to and then another to cross the North Sea? Were the Germans staging to invade England? I glared at the German soldier guarding the post office. He shared a round-the-clock shift with two other soldiers. I could see one of them every time I looked outside. My mind drifted. What would my life be like if Germany won? If Hitler had his way, we'd be part of an Ubrik, held up to the world as a master race, with defeated people forced to work as slaves to satisfy their masters. If the bloody Nazis won, the Churchill Club, or something like us, would have to move even further underground. Someone would keep hope alive. We would be forced to continue resisting in an occupied country after the war. I wished I had someone to talk about all this. Sure, Jens was my brother, and he shared the danger of our work, but he wasn't someone I could confide in. We competed over everything. I could get ridiculous. Back in Odense, we both fell in love with the same American movie star, Dana Durbin. We had one photo of her, and we tore it in half so that neither of us could have her to himself. The same thing with our record player, a gramophone. It had a detachable crank arm that you had to use to get started. It would take the record of Deanna Durbin singing, and I would take the record of Deanna Durbin singing, and Jens would grab the arm. We could only hear her when we were together, the last place we wanted to be. Boris shared my sense of humor, but he was too young and didn't go to my school. And I was not all that close to the others in the Churchill Club, even though most were in my grade. We shared a common passion to awake Denmark. That was enough. No, I wanted to open my heart to a particular someone special. Grete Rohrbeck was a student in 9th grade, like me. Tall and blonde, she wore no makeup but had a natural beauty and a wonderful smile. Though she was in my grade, I had no classes with her. She was in the advanced classes. I was in the B group. The closest we came to exchanging a word was a magical day we crossed paths in the yard between classes. She had a box of small sandwiches and stopped to offer me one. I couldn't say a word. In fact, I was so flushed I didn't even return to school that day. I walked home, lay down on the couch in Father's office. Mother, without asking questions, served me warm tea and stayed with me. My shyness didn't stop me from having heroic fantasies starring the two of us. One was set in Badolfi Square. The Churchill Club had climbed to the top of the church tower and were hurling mortar shells and bombs onto the square below. Flames erupted from German vehicles, one car setting the next ablaze in a furious chain of pyrotechnics. And the most glorious moment, I drove into the square in a small open car. I stood up in the car with one foot on the seat, waving a pistol with my free hand. By now the square was an inferno. Bombs and exploding engines threw sheets of brilliant light, illuminating charred, frightened faces peering out from the shadows. I drove on through a hail of bullets, and suddenly, over the whine of lead, I heard a scream from the top floor of a building on the square. I looked up, and there was Greth, standing, eyes wide, her sweet hands pressed to her mouth, her slender form illuminated by fire. We locked eyes meaningfully, and then I lost sight of her. The fantasy usually popped about then, crushed beneath the weight of its own absurdity. The pitiful truth was, I had never had a serious conversation with any girl, not even my sister, Gertrude. When I first got to cathedral school, I tried to impress girls by getting into fights. That's the way you gain status in my old school at Odense. But that had been an all-boys school, where you settled everything with your fist behind the school by the statue of the businessman Carl Frederick Teagden. Now I'd knock somebody down and look around and see the girls backing away. They'd seem horrified, not impressed. Finally, somebody convinced me I'd do better with girls by opening doors for them and inviting them to precede me in line, or figuring out how to help them with their coats. So far, nearly one semester in cathedral school, that hadn't worked any better. I was still light years away from kissing my first girl, with no candidates on the horizon. There was just so much to think about. We at the Churchill Club were brave but naive and undisciplined. Just days before, at a skating rink, Jens had skated up behind a German soldier and kicked him in the leg. The guy howled in pain and took off after Jens, who was chased down and taken to the police station. Now his name was enshrined in a registry of those who opposed the Nazis. Just what we needed. And it was only by the greatest good fortune that Helge made it over the Limfjorden Bridge with our weapons, now buried in his garden. Had we taken too great a risk? There were so many near misses. What if the German soldier washing the window had turned around to see me making off with the rifle? Would I have had to shoot him? Would I have known how? Was the rifle even loaded? What if the woman on the street had yelled for the police as we pedaled away? What if the German officer at Christina moved his body to block my way out of the coat closet? But there were even more ominous thoughts crowding my brain for headline space as I tried to relax in my room. Angel's older sister was the secretary of the Aalborg police. She was the only outsider who knew about us, and it was good to have a trusted mole embedded with the authorities. However, her news wasn't good. The German command had issued a ultimatum to the Danish police. Either you identify and arrest whoever has been damaging our property and stealing our weapons, or we'll find them ourselves with drastic results for the criminals. If this continues, they were saying, Germany's infamous secret state police force, the Gestapo, will take over the policing of Aalborg. Egel's sister has said two elite professional investigators have been sent up from Copenhagen and were now drawing closer every day. A witness from Cafe Hull, where we had lifted a German pistol, and two fishermen who had seen us steal weapons at the waterfront were directing investigations toward Cathedral School. Stop now, Egel's sister pleaded. Lie low. She and her brother had a very strong personal interest at stake. Theirs was the only Jewish family among the Churchill Club members. Egil feared that his arrest could lead to capture by the Nazis and death for his entire family. Overnight, Egil had suddenly gone from pushing us to go out on missions every day to begging us to close down. His nerves were raw and his emotions were very turbulent. Lying low was the last thing I wanted. Norwegians were still fighting and dying, and Danes were singing folk songs and buying king's badges. We were still occupied. The Germans seemed more at home in Aalborg by the day. If I had to go down, I wanted to go down fighting like the hero of my fantasies. Flames flickered from the tiny stove in my room at the monastery. The German guard outside my window kept pacing robotically back and forth. Finally, many hours after our meeting concluded, I fell asleep. Chapter 9. The Nibe Offensive. Early in May 1942, Borges decided on his own to try out a new recruit for the Churchill Club. Perhaps he had visions of starting his own club. His motive was never clear to the others. The candidate was a friend from Nibe, the small town outside of Aalborg where Borges lived. He gave this boy, who was only 13, a can of blue paint and told him to go paint the club's ensign, the swastika with arrows proclaiming the rebellion against the Nazis all over town. But Nibe was a close community in which everybody knew each other. Within minutes, the boy was in police custody, getting his ears boxed by an officer who warned him to forget his child fantasies of revolution. The officer gave the boy a wire brush and a bucket of suds and ordered him to get busy removing the paint from all the walls he had defaced. As he scrubbed, the boy became angrier and angrier. By the time he finished, he had conceived a plan. He told Borge of a remote German guard post, an armed tower in the sand dunes on the outskirts of town, and a searchlight that swept back and forth for great distances to give the Germans a view out over the North Sea toward England. The post was manned by 3 German soldiers who lived together in a nearby barracks. The angry boy proposed to use the Churchill Club weapons to kill the German soldiers. The Nile offensive, as he called it, would show the world who was a child and who meant business. Intrigued, Borge went to Aalborg to try the proposal out on the rest of the Churchill Club. When our anger at Borge for trying out a new recruit without telling us, "What were you thinking?" subsided, we coldly considered the proposal to shoot the German guards at Nibe. It wasn't the first time the club had mulled over killing. Weeks before, another member had advocated stabbing a German guard in the back, but he was shouted down by others who said such an act would violate our code of fair play. An enemy must have a chance. On the one hand, the idea of Borch was the same sort of thing, a sneak attack. It also violated a second key club proposition, never kill for personal revenge. But on the other hand, the club's mission included a vow to minimize the Germans who had stolen our country. How could one minimize them more than erasing them? Besides, now we had weapons. Were we going to use them, or did we just intend to let them rust in held parsley garden and monastery cellar until the British came to liberate us? The motion for the Nibe offensive was raised, and the action was approved by the members. I helped Borch draw up the attack diagram, but I refused to go with him. I did not favor his mission. Besides, we had an action plan in Aalborg at the railway yard for the same evening, a military-style strike that would allow us to use our new weapons. I told Borge our strike was much more important than biking out to Nibe to quench some boy's bloodlust. But Borge had his mind made up. I didn't waste time trying to dissuade him. Borge later told Nudd that he took off for Nibe with 2 companions, one the angry boy and another Churchill Club regular who had volunteered to go. They stopped at Hutch Garden to pick up the machine gun, and a pair of pistols. They continued on. The boys arrived at Nibe in the early afternoon. They stashed their weapons in a nearby Boy Scout hut and took a reconnaissance walk along the dunes in the late afternoon. They strolled up the hill towards the German barracks. Suddenly the door kicked open from the side, and one of the German soldiers appeared, not in the crisp military uniform, but in shirt sleeves and suspenders, smoking his pipe. He was quickly joined by his mates. The 3 jolly soldiers saluted the kids, who wished them a good afternoon, and waved them to come up. The group stood outside in the sunshine and had a cordial conversation. These guys clearly didn't much conversation way up there, and they were happy to see the boys. They talked about their grandchildren back in Germany. It got harder and harder to view them as part of Hitler's deadly worshipment. By the time he got back to the hut, Borch was deeply convicted. Why kill these 3 grandfathers? Is that really the war he wanted to fight? But they were on a mission to take out these particular German guards. They had been authorized to do it, and now they were duty-bound. A mission was a mission. With darkness fell, they carried their weapons to a drainage ditch at the bottom of a grassy hill below the German barracks. They spread out into 3 columns, Borch front and center with a machine gun, and the other 2 flanking him with pistols. The plan was to crawl through the grass on their bellies up the hill. When they got close enough, they would pause. Then on a time count, they would smash through the door and open fire. As they scooted through the wet grass, Borch tried to put himself in a mindset of a warrior. This was necessary, he reminded himself. This would show the Germans what April 9 was all about. This would wake up the docile Danes. He could see the newspaper headlines. Germans shot down with their own weapons by young boys. The light from a single candle inside the barracks danced with every step closer. 30 meters from the side of the structure, there was still no sound. Borch's hands were trembling, and then, suddenly, the door opened. One of the old men came out on the porch and looked around. Had he heard something? The soldier stood for a while, then closed the door behind him, walked across the dune grass to the guard station, and climbed up the ladder to his listening post. Now the target was spread out. 2 Germans in one building, one in another. All 3 were above them. The boys' chances of mission success had just plummeted. Now it looked more like a suicide mission than a carefully conceived assault. Their thoughts went swiftly from murder to escape. They lay motionless for it felt like hours, pressed down, flat in the grass. They were wet, cold, and terrified. The Germans up in his listening post at the lighthouse surely had a rifle. After the time they began to inch backward down through the grass, their bodies cramped with tension. It took nearly half an hour to reach the ditch. The longer to creep back to their hut. Once safely inside, the boys attacked one another verbally, but each blamed the others for chickening out. Exhausted and humiliated, Boris stormed out of the hut and took off on his bike, leaving the others behind. He dreaded telling the rest of the Churchill Club of the night of offensive failure, but more than that, he hungered to be part of the night's activities in Aalborg. Boris sped 15 miles through the dark countryside, hoping to reach Aalborg railway yard in time to take part in what promised to be the Churchill Club's biggest and most daring action yet. And that is the end of Chapter 9. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a big thumbs up, comment down below. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video.